Hello, everyone. And it's a big lot of people coming in today. So really good to see you all. Welcome to Mastering Life Shorts webinar 8. Today, we're going to be looking at power, which is something that's often on the minds of people in BDSM, but also in the workplace and in relationships. As you'll see from my first story, picture the scene. It's about 3 a.m. in the morning. And I'm sitting on that a chair that looks very like that in A&E, sitting next to my very recently ex, who was sitting on the bed, having been rather stupid to himself. And at that point, I realized that if I gave him too much care at that point, then he would keep doing this. So I turned around and said, if you do this again, I'm going to ignore you. And I realized what was going on was he was trying to pull me back into the relationship that I've written quite a lot about in Mastering Life, the ebook, that he was trying to make me care for him. Now, what's this got to do with power? Well, according to Eric Lynn, power is the capacity to make others do what you would have them do. So he was clearly trying to get me to care for him when I didn't particularly want to care for him at that point in my life. And so I stopped him from having that power over me. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going into how power works in various different places in life, and in the workplace, and in relationships, and the types of power. And sometimes this is because you want to have more power over people, and sometimes it's because you want to recognize that power is being held over you. So we'll look at all of that in just 15 minutes. So think back, who was your favorite teacher? Now, if you're like me, and most people are, your favorite teacher wasn't one of those teachers who was ultra strict. I had one teacher who, if you wrote on the wrong line in your books, then you'd get told off. But also one of those, it wouldn't have been one of those teachers who was a complete pushover, who just put their feet up on the table and just sort of chatted away. It was someone in the middle. I tried to explain this to teachers when I was a head of department and I was training teachers, that those people who came in, and for some reason they always seemed to be middle-aged women who'd had kids and then wanted to become teachers afterwards. They came in expecting respect, and they never got it because they didn't have that personality of caring for the kids that came through. Most people find that the teachers they work with have a combination of two types of power. They have personal power and they have positional power. Now, every teacher officially has positional power. That's the case of, I can stop you from doing this, and if you don't do it, or I can make you do this, and if you don't do it, then I can put you in detention or whatever. But the personal power is important too, in that if you didn't care about that teacher and you didn't feel that the teacher cared about you, then you wouldn't have done the work for them. And it's been shown many times that actually in schools, kids will not work for the results for themselves, they'll work for the teacher. Now, this is exactly the same in the workplace. People in the workplace, bosses in the workplace have positional power. I can fire you, I can give you bonuses, but they also have personal power. And it's that combination of the two that makes really powerful leadership. Now, let's unpick these two types of power. Kim Jong-un has got positional power in spades. People literally get bumped off if they say the wrong things or disappear. Does this mean it's a bad thing? Well, when I was working in the workplace and I had to push through a reform that required a lot of people to work together in a very short period of time to some very strict deadlines and some very, very stringent rules, many of which the people didn't agree with but were externally set, then I absolutely needed to use my positional power. It's needed to complete tasks, to push things through, to make changes happen quickly. It's often seen as strong leadership. But If people misuse positional power and use it only, then they're not going to get things done. I see this every now and then on Twitter when I see someone who's submissive complaining that someone contacted them on Recon or Grindr or one of these apps and said, oi, bitch, do this, or send me money, or I'm going to lock you up and for however long. And you're like, I don't owe you anything. And the submissives know perfectly well that they don't owe anything to anyone who just says, I'm a master. And some new dominants in BDSM really get this wrong, as do people who are newly in managerial positions. They get it wrong by thinking it's all about positional power. Now, this picture is from a video on a Twitter feed, and I felt that the video was probably not safe for YouTube. And in the video, it's about a minute long, and that slave is forcing something down his throat, and the dominant is obviously enjoying it. But what's really important about this is there is nothing making the submissive do it apart from the personal power of the dominant. He is doing it for the dominant. Now, there's a moment in the video, if you ever saw it, and you can search Rope Train Keep's Twitter feed, it was quite fairly recently, to see this video. There's a moment they look at each other and the submissive just melts as his master's eyes meet him. That's personal power. Personal power is when people respond because they want to. In the workplace, this is when you go to the accountant's department and you say, look, I know that, I can't ask you to do this. I know that we've got a 3-day turnaround for this particular thing, but would you do this for me? And they respond because they like you and they want to do it. It's not only about, bringing cakes to work and being nice to people, though. It's also about being seen as reliable and trustworthy. Going back to schools, the teachers with personal power, those teachers who really knew their stuff, who really were seen to go the extra mile for their students, and the same for managers. If people have got expert knowledge, they've often seen as having personal power because people will listen to them. In my last company, I knew a lot about the subject that my colleagues were talking about with customers, and so they would often come to me, and I had much more personal power than I should have done given my position in that company. It comes from networking and from making contacts throughout the company and those relationship building. Now, look at this picture. Who's in charge? It's certainly not the black guy at the back. He looks like he's having a very bad day. Now, traditionally, you would have often said that the person who is standing up has the most dominant position, but I would contend that the black lady on the left-hand side is the one who's got the most power in this picture. Now, other people might read it differently, but my reading of this is all about body language. People who are leaders who have got power tend to have much bigger stances. They take up more space. The women on the right-hand side are taking up less space, especially the woman in black. She's crouching herself in, making herself small. So she's telling the world, I'm smaller than I am. Excuse me. Excuse me. The woman on the left-hand side, on the other hand, she's quite broad. She's taking up the space that she is able to. There's also an eye contact thing going on here. And what you tend to find with people who have got power tend to make eye contact when they are saying something. And then when they're being addressed, they don't have to listen. They can look away. When someone has got less power, when they're subordinate, they tend to make eye contact when the dominant person is speaking, so they're giving all the attention, but often they will lose eye contact and look away when they're trying to make a point because they don't feel so sure of themselves. Now, why this is important is because often people give out the wrong messages. If you're in a position of power in the company, then if you're not making yourself take the space, giving yourself the space that you've got, if you're making yourself small, if you're looking away, if you're not using full sentences, then you're being seen as subordinate. Likewise, I know in clubs, when I walk into a club, I take up a lot of space, and I will spot those people who truly don't take up a lot of space, and I will see them as submissive to me. And then there's people who give completely mixed messages. So you have new DOMs who are a little bit scared of what they're doing, and so they'll look away and look down. And you have submissives who, there's one in particular that I've seen all over Twitter, who's always standing with these massive, big space, who will look you straight in the eye. And then it doesn't quite gel. Why you're telling me that you're submissive, and yet you're showing this. No, I'm not saying everyone should act. I'm saying if you're aware of the space and the body language that you're giving out, then the power that you have within you is congruent with the way you are in life. So just be really aware of that. Now, thinking about you. If power is the capacity to make others do what you would have them do, then what are you trying to make others do, either in your relationships or at work or at home? And how can you be more effective at this? So, for example, could you be better at showing the power you have? Could you be better at using personal power or positional power to push the change through that you want to do? What are others trying to make you do? And are you happy to comply? Where are people using their personal power to wheedle in and push you to do things that you really didn't want to do in the first place? Where are people using positional power in ways that is unfair or unethical? So in order to think about this more deeply, what I would suggest you do is you go to my website, englishleathermaster.com/mastering-life-shorts, and you download the website, the worksheet for this week. The password is powerful with a capital P, and it will talk you through some ways of really breaking this down. Now, this is one of these things that's very, very personal, and different people will need this in different places. Some people, because they are I don't know, they're new to leadership roles and they need to develop their own personal power. Sometimes because they're finding themselves in places that they don't want to be in, and they're finding other people have power over them. So you can do this, or you could contact me and we can work through this on one-to-one coaching, which is a really powerful way of moving through, because you can do all sorts of things, like you can role play, or you can consider different options for how you can use the limited positional power you have at your fingertips. Now, that's all for this week. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Otherwise, I will see you next week when I will be talking about wholehearted living. So this is the third in the series of Brené Brown's guideposts for wholehearted living. And we'll be talking particularly about how we can rest and play better. So unless there's any questions, I look forward to seeing you next week.